Straight up smoke out of the exhaust. What is up, Rad Potential YouTube? I'm Mr. Rad. Welcome to today's video. This is not a video that I want to have to make, but the beautiful black FD that I put together over the past year has a major issue. It's related to E85, it's related to oil dilution, and I'm gonna have to take this whole thing apart to investigate what's wrong. So, the car is currently smoking like a freight train, excessively. Still fires right up, rips. However, the oil consumption is off the charts. This is not like an oil metering pump drinking a lot of oil over 1,000 miles. No, this is like, it burns a quart of oil like driving this around the neighborhood sort of oil consumption, which is just insane. So let's dive in. Comment below what you think the issue is. Is it the turbo? Is it oil control rings? Did it spin a bearing? I don't know. However, it sucks because this was probably one of the most overbuilt FD RX7s, and it should not have had one of these issues. Like, this is definitely, not to cut me as the builder or the owner, you know, any slack here, but I think this is probably a user error issue and not a parts failure. It's just my hunch. So we're gonna dive right in. Let's figure it out. The best part about working on a car that you built and put every nut and bolt in is that you know exactly how it's gonna come back apart, except it's just a little bit dirtier. So go ahead and pop in the intercooler, getting ready to take this thing all apart. Catch can's pretty full. Finding that the catch can's just a little bit full, we're going to go ahead, remove the catch can, remove the intercooler, and get ready to really start digging into this thing. Go ahead and drain the oil, and you can see the oil is pretty thin. You could read your newspaper through this deal. This isn't an IPA beer. This is more like a light beer, and it smells very fuely. So, getting the coolant drained, getting the bottom turbo bolts off. This turbo has to come out with the manifold attached. We'll get that out of the way, and now we can look and see that rear rotor is consuming some oil. Really consuming some oil. It's literally 50 shades darker. The turbo is off, and as you saw, we got oil in the rear rotor housing excessively. Before I brought this car home, when I was down at Richard's house, the owner, I pulled the downpipe off and I did not see an excessive amount of oil coming out of the turbo. Now you can see obviously there's oil here right now, and that's because I started this and didn't warm it up all the way. And when you warm it up all the way, it burns all the oil out, right? And then when I checked it at Richard's house, there was no oil in the system at all because it had been already up to temperature. I did it all burned out of the exhaust and there was no oil coming out of the turbo. So it's definitely, most likely, an oil control ring failure on the rear rotor. I don't really know why it would do that. I mean, the oil that I pulled out of it, guys, is super thin. It's impossible for me to show you how thin this is on camera, but look at how that just drips off my finger. So it doesn't have a lot of lubricity, meaning like when I rub my fingers together, it feels more like water than oil, if that makes sense. It's definitely not water. It smells like fuel. This car was exclusively ran on E85 for the most part, you know, at least an ethanol content of above 60% for the whole entire summer. You know, Richard rips on this thing. It's just not a car that gets, you know, just babied around. This one gets rode hard and put up wet, and it's, I'm happy for the test data. Not happy that I have to take it back apart. So, the oil's thin. When you run E85 like that, it is a lot more prone to fuel dilution, meaning as you're ripping on the car, you're consuming a lot more fuel. Thus, under boost, you're getting more blow-by. You're putting more fuel past the side seals, past the oil control rings into the oil system. Over time, if you run it low on oil, which just has all the oil pressure safeties and all that, but oil pressure doesn't tell you necessarily how thick or thin the oil is. You can have decent pressure, but it's not going to be of a high lubricity, meaning it's not going to actually be doing what it's supposed to do. It's going to be all broken down. It has all that stuff built into the Haltech. Obviously, the logs don't show any of those engine protections being tripped, so maybe they were set too safe. I don't know. But at this point, we know it's in the engine, which means I'm going to yank this thing up out of here. Fortunately, it's just a straight up simple single turbo FD. I already got the turbo off. All the fluids are drained. So we just got to drain the power steering, which always makes a mess. Pull the fuel lines, and this thing should pop right out. I don't even think I need to pull the radiator. I'm going to leave most of this stuff up in here, and we're going to lift it right out the front of the car. Sad day, as always, having to make a video about a failure, but everything in life is a flip of perspective from being good, and we're going to learn why this engine failed, such that then my REW swapped to RX7, same engine, E85, same fuel system, the whole deal. We don't have this failure again, and then you guys don't have this failure as well. So, let's go. Fortunately, on a single turbo FD, it's exactly that. It's almost like a simple turbo FD. Go ahead and pull the upper intake, pull the power steering off. Of course, we made a huge mess, so I got to clean that up. The bottom of the car, we do all the bell housing bolts, get the starter, and we're ready to start lifting this thing out. On an FD, it can be a little tricky to negotiate the engine mounts around stuff, but look at this deal, spinning like a diamond in the light. Coveted 13B REW. Man, this thing would make a great engine for an RX-8 somewhere. Go ahead and pop in the engine stand on this thing, and now we're ready to start undressing the 13B REW. So water pump, alternator, all of that stuff can come off, and of course, still making a more big, large coolant mess. It's inevitable. Coolant goes everywhere. Lower intake manifold, and then a bigger coolant mess. Getting the clutch off, and then getting to where we can take the flywheel bolt off. I decided to go ahead and take the oil pan off, which is going to make another mess right here because there's just always fluids in an engine. I don't know. It's inevitable. The perfect ding, and the flywheel comes right off, and this front hub bolt was tight. So I had to put the flywheel back on, put my flywheel brake on, grab my handy dandy jack handle, and we're ready. That really wasn't that tight. Maybe the impact's wore out. To bust that nut loose. Pop the front cover off, and we're ready to basically start investigating at this point and see what we can find. It's officially science time. We get to figure out what actually happened to this deal. Oil pan came off, everything's super sludgy in the oil pan, and it smells terrible. I mean, I'm not a regular E85 user like Richard is. Like the RX7 has E85 in it now, which probably means since I haven't driven it in a month or so, it's not going to like to start, and I'm going to have to deal with all that. But regardless, so I'll cross that bridge when I get there. That car versus this car, this one has seen a ton more miles than my car on E85. So to give you the rundown, I finished this car up for Richard before Deal's Gap earlier this year. And I think I got it back here, I don't know. It's probably been here longer than I think, but he put about 2,000 miles on it, probably 2,000 miles on it. Drove it to Atlanta, Formula Drift, drove it to Deal's Gap. He drives his cars all the time. So this is 2,000 miles. That's our data point. Let's look at the oil pump. Science. I don't see any scoring that's out of the ordinary. So, oil pump looks good. No bearing material, no metal. That's really what I'm worried about, guys, is like an oil control ring is one thing, but even a broken oil control ring can put metal through everything, so we don't want any metal in this engine. If there is metal in the engine, I'm not saying we're completely in a, bad spot, but we're definitely not in as good a spot as if there was no metal. Pop the bearing cover off. Well overkill pry bar, but ding. Bearing cover off. We got to put one of these bolts back in so the stationary gear doesn't fall out. Always remember that. Bing, bang, boom. The second Torrington bearing should come up out of here. Looks fine. In-place spacer. All of this stuff, guys, I'm assuming is just going to be fine. I mean, I don't have to take these out, but this will be our first sign. If they're too tight for that, they're probably too tight for a neutral drop. Let's try it. Oh, winner. Neutral drops for the win. Good old Milwaukee neutral drop. All right. So on a rotary engine, guys, I didn't look at the bearing yet. The oiling goes as such. It comes in the back right here by the oil filter. It goes down to this bearing or through the upper dowel right here, which then goes down to the front bearing. The oil pressure regulator is at the rear iron, so as oil pressure builds, it bleeds off into the pan. Super simple setup. So if anything was hurt bearing-wise, the first bearing to fail, i.e. the last bearing to get oil, would be the front stationary gear bearing. Ugh. I'm gonna have to show you all this up close. I don't particularly like what I'm seeing, but I've definitely seen worse. Alright guys, it's not bad. It's not bad, but it's not good. These were brand new bearings, and I think we're just starting to wear them in. Some of the coating's coming off. I don't see any evidence of crazy dirt spikes. Dirt spots, dirt spikes. Dirt spikes. Dirt spikes, like a dirt scooter. That's a dirt bike for those of you who don't speak the lingo. Okay. Rear stack gear. As expected. Alright. Now time for the big mess. Let's pop the rear iron off. I gotta pull these tension bolts out. This is the bad one. Let's see what we got. Okay. Okay. The iron looks okay. At least that one does. Ooh, that oil control ring popped right out. This engine was running good, guys, so it should have good compression still. No issues. We should just be able to rip this thing. Did I put these apex seals in the other way? I think I did. All right. Oh yeah, I forgot this engine has one-piece dowels. It's gonna suck. The dowels I got weren't threaded on both ends, which is really inconvenient. So this one has to just, I have to pull it out, which is gonna end up marring the end of it, which is gonna suck. So, that's inconvenient. Okay. So if you're new to seeing one of these come apart, when you take them apart, you want to put them back exactly how they were, because all the seals are clearance to fit in their specific location, and you don't want to mess that up, especially in this situation where this engine doesn't need a total rebuild. Guys, this is just, we're getting in here to fix an oiling issue, which is not fun, but we got to do it. Okay, that looks good. I'm going to go ahead and lift this rotor out of here, and we're going to have to keep an eye on where everything was at so we can put it back. Gosh dang, those oil control rings are just popped out as well. That was one right there, so that makes this 3, 4 intermediate numbers. I do feel, guys, that there's just a little bit of some sticky carbon in here. That's probably a function of the E85 and premix. Sometimes they aren't your best friends. They don't get along very well. They starts to separate out, do weird stuff. All right, so this was 1, which makes this 2, which makes this 3. There's a corner of the apex seal that needs to match with its other side of the apex seal. My hands are filthy, but I want to show you this up close. Look at, this is as I lifted it out. So look at how the oil control rings have just popped out of here. Like they're not stuck in the rotor very well. They just come right out. I mean, you all know how much I fight to get these things in here, which this is all new OEM Mazda stuff. I don't really like that. This is the one that's burning oil, definitely. You can see, look how dark this exhaust port is, how light that one is. The only way for it to burn this much oil, like excessively like that, is definitely an oil control ring failure. And the only real way for that to happen, like for it to be caused, in my opinion, with all this stuff being new, is either two things. One, the machine work on the rotors, something around the oil control rings, whether they were side clearanced or whatever, is causing the problem, or the E85 diluted the oil, which then caused the oil control rings to wear out prematurely, which I don't see evidence of that. I see evidence of them coming out, but I don't see evidence that they were actually cooked from E85. So the front rotor, in theory, should be perfect in this engine. Now I gotta, take the rest of this apart, but this was the one we were looking for issues on. So I'm gonna blow the rest of this down, and then we'll take a closer look at everything once it's all apart and cleaned up just a bit. It's not ideal. I was hoping that one of those O-rings would be cracked or broken, or we'd have, it's good to not have excessive wear on the irons, but there's no standout reason right now for this oil consumption issue, guys. There really isn't. Not in this. It wouldn't be a stuck injector, because then it wouldn't start as fast like it, I guess oil, but if it was diluted with fuel, it'd be flooded. Yeah, y'all know. I'm gonna take this apart.
I had built engines with extra studs and solid dowels before, but taking them apart is always a pain. I literally had to hammer and pry this engine apart, which is okay. We didn't damage anything. Careful not to mar up the aluminum. But then this was really tricky by myself. The E-shaft, center iron, and housing came off together, and I had to hammer that apart at a separate time.
I've got everything apart, and I want to unpack with you guys what really failed in this engine, because there's ultimately no definitive mechanical failure. So I want to show you guys some important things that I look for as I'm tearing this down in preparation to rebuild this, plus give you guys the information that I acquired reaching out to some of my friends who build a lot more of these engines than I do with regard to this exact failure. So let's look closely at some of these parts and just talk through some of the wear that I'm seeing in this engine. A lot of you guys, after let's say 2 to 4, 5, 6,000 miles, you're not ready to just take your engine apart, but then the engine gets, more miles on it down the road, and then you take the engine apart when something breaks. So this is a good intermediate wear checkup for everybody. So first things first, looking at this front stationary gear and the bearing inside, you can see that we've just now started to have some of that coating wear off. And you can notice there's a little bit more of the coating wore off up here, because that is the top of the bearing. And looking at this engine, the reason that the top of the bearing wears out faster is when you tighten your alternator belt, it pulls up on the eccentric shaft, which then wears the top of that bearing quicker. So nothing abnormal on the front stationary gear. And while we're looking at gears and their bearings, the rear one looks about the same. So some of that coating is starting to wear off, but there is no copper showing at all. And in the rear, you can kind of expect the opposite. As the front of the eccentric shaft goes up, the rear of the eccentric shaft is going to go down, which is perfect time to just go ahead and look at this. Nothing excessive. This is still a little bit oily on this eccentric shaft. One of the real unfortunate things about this engine, or I guess it's fortunate and unfortunate, is that this whole entire rotating assembly has been blueprint balanced, which means that this eccentric shaft, the counterweight, the rear counterweight, plus the rotors are all matched together. So I can't change just one thing. It's a whole unit. So if I wanted to change the rotors, if there was an issue with these rotors, I would have to change out the entire rotating assembly. So now there's pluses and minuses of that. Talk to balancing, lightening, all that stuff in a future video, especially when we go redo the engine in the green RX7, which has an REW in it. And we're going to push that engine really far. We'll really dive into the details there. Next up is the dowels. So this engine has solid dowels. They go from the front to the back. They're one piece. These were a pain in the rear to get out. Okay, I had to hammer these out of the engine. It was real unfortunate. You saw when I pulled it apart that they were stuck. So I've cleaned these up a little bit, just wiped them off. There's some high tack in here, some dirt, the heat. Another thing, notice this upper dowel, it is one piece, but it is hollow. So this upper hollow dowel allows for that oil passage to stay open, in addition to creating the strength. If we were to run a solid dowel like this in the upper section, that would mean I would have to externally feed oil to the front, and that's really hard, especially keeping air conditioning and power steering. So probably a little too much info there, but good enough. Next up will be the apex seal. So notice you can see a little bit of carbon showing up on the edges of these. The main wear surface looks pretty much perfect, so I'm very happy with the wear on these apex seals, so that's a win. Corner seals look pretty much perfect. And then also too, same thing for the side seals. So you can see I'm holding this such that the bottom of the side seal is what is down on your screen. And you can see kind of some of the carbon buildup. Notice how thick the upper black line is on this. Since these rotors have been side clearanced, which means that the rotor itself at the edges is thinner, these side seals are going to stick out just a little bit further in this engine than in a standard non-clearance rotor set. And what that does do is it does add a little bit of extra stress to the side seal itself because we don't put taller side seals in it. So now this is less supported. Imagine taking something and putting it in like the crack of my concrete here, and you put it in there and it only goes down so far. If you were able to put that in deeper, right, pre-clearanced, a stock rotor would have a deeper cut. The piece you put in there would be harder to break off than if we saw cut the concrete shallower. You could put something in there and it would break off, you know, less of it. Very simple concept, but just applied in a different spot. As far as the actual oil control rings go, I haven't wiped these off yet, so I apologize for a little bit of the dirt. But they look good. I don't foresee, there's no evidence that they spun. I did go ahead and pull all of them out, and when I did take them out, I verified that all my springs were in the right direction. One of the things that would cause this is that, notice the round side of the spring. It's hard for you to see because it's super thin, but the round side of the spring on the front of a rotor needs to be down, and on the rear of the rotor it needs to be down as well. But on the front it's left side down, and on the rear it's right side down. So you got to make sure that you have those springs in the right direction. I've actually got a little rotor assembly stand, you know, Mr. Advertisement here. My rotor assembly stands have that tip written on them so that you can't mess it up if you're building one of them on one of my stands. So as far as the rest of the apex seals, the rest of everything looks like it has been wearing very consistently. Ultimately, the only inconsistent part that I have is over here on the rotor. So I went ahead and cleaned these two rotors up. This one right here is the front rotor. This is the rear rotor. The interesting thing about the front rotor is that the carbon that was on this rotor was super baked on, very dry carbon. So you can see here, it's very dry, no oil impregnation. This is the rotor that was not burning oil. So it also had, notice this spot right here. This is like some actual, instead of carbon buildup, we had some rust. So that is this rotor. You'll notice it does have these scallops cut in it, and these rotors are specific to their orientation. So I can't put the front rotor in the back because of the scallops, and I can't put the back rotor in the front because of the scallops. So they have their own location. It's kind of hard to mess them up. It's kind of like an RX7 rotor to some extent. Now on the rear, I wanted to leave all of this carbon on here, and this is the rotor that was burning oil. So you can see this is the most carbony side. I cleaned the rest of this stuff off just to make sure everything was okay, but this was the worst one. So notice a little bit of oil buildup on the edges. One of the things I've noticed over time with running these engines on E85, just a couple other engines I've built in the past, is the E85 likes to build up this kind of more gelatiny substance here and not a dry carbon buildup that you would see on an OEM engine. So notice, like, yes, this side was consuming more oil, but if you're not running the proper premix for E85, you're going to get this gluey gelatin stuff built up in here. At least in my experience, that's what I've seen. So fortunately, like, this carbon does pretty much come right off. It's not an excessive amount of carbon. I think that it is an excessive amount for 2,000 miles basically on this engine. So I'm curious to, E85 does burn a lot colder, which means that you're not going to be getting your combustion chamber temperature up high enough to burn off all of this carbon. Whereas pump gas, the combustion chamber does get a lot hotter, generates a higher EGT, and that is going to keep all of this carbon burned off and cleaned. So one of the things I kind of want to make note of in this engine setup like this is that this was pretty much strictly ran on E85, right? And that's 2,000 miles of ethanol, low EGT, even when you're ripping it. So it's probably good if you have a flex fuel sensor to be able to maybe alternate or mix in a pump gas tank here and there to really get the EGTs up and keep all of this stuff burned out. I don't like having all this extra buildup in here. I don't like this gelatiny stuff. Carbon's bad, guys. It gets your apex seal stuck in here, side seal stuck in here. You know, you can really see, like, notice this rotor would be oriented this way, okay? So it's gonna be spinning towards you, right? This is the rear rotor. So notice how, as this rotor is coming around, a lot of that carbon buildup is on this leading edge, okay? Because as this rotor keeps rotating, right here, when it's perfectly vertical, the spark plugs are gonna fire, you know, leading then trailing. So the tail of the rotor is gonna catch a lot more heat as it comes over. So you can see like why there's buildup here and not here. Just an interesting thing to note. So, and you can notice that these are intake scallops. So this will be easier to see on this exact spot, but this right here, and what that's going to do is as it swings open, this is going to open the intake port sooner and give it more duration, as in let it open longer because we've cut that down. So, interesting thing. I have a video, I think, from a few years back going over scallops and port timing and stuff, and it's an interesting spot to just see, you know, these are probably the rotors that were in that video because this engine wasn't built at that point in time, but it's always interesting to see that. The other thing, you know, while we're here looking at this rotor up close, to note is you can see that this is thinner, okay? It's cut back. You can really see it, how this oil control ring area is pronounced. And I don't know how much they take off of these. I've seen where people take 5/1000ths off tips, but leave the rest of this. I feel like there's more of an art form to doing this than just putting it in a mill and lopping a bunch of metal off. At the same time, I do have a slight worry with these rotors. We are going to put them back in the engine. That being clearance down like that is what's allowing those oil control rings to just see a lot more heat and see a lot more wear. There's just not a lot of support right here. Like this outer ring is what I worry about, guys. So this outer ring right here, with it being machined down like that, isn't protecting the outside of the oil control ring housing from all this heat that could get around the side seals. Now I know in a perfect world, the compression is all sealed. At the same time, it's never a perfect world. All right, guys, this is probably one of the craziest little clips I have to film because I didn't realize this as I was actually filming the video earlier today. I got this rotor cleaned up, all right, like fully cleaned, pulled all the carbon that you guys just saw off of it, the whole deal. And y'all might have noticed this little crack, but I didn't see it. What is crazy is look right here. This is 100% the issue. It's definitely not an oil control ring issue. This is this rotor mechanically. Look at the side seal groove is collapsed, which then cracked the side of the rotor. I'll let the focus come in right there. Look at that. Look at the wide spot in the side seal groove. And then see that hole literally in the side of the rotor. I've never seen this before, ever. This is so insane. So what happens is, inside your rotary engine on the eccentric shaft, there's actually little squirters that spray oil into the backside of your rotor because the rotors are actually hollow. And that oil is there to cool off the combustion chamber. It's just cooling this face of a rotor from the bottom side. So up in there, if you think the rotor is spinning, there is oil that is trapped up into the rotor itself, right? It's like kind of full of oil to some extent because the centrifugal force, the outward seeking force as something spins, is holding that oil up in here. And then that's where the smoke is coming from, is from this hole. So this hole is going to be allowing oil to go past the oil control rings and then get consumed by the rear rotor, which is this one. I've never seen it. You can see even right here, look at that mark right there as well. See the deflection in this spot where that's super thin? I don't see it right here. I guess we can look at all the different faces of the rotor to see. I don't really see it anywhere else, nor do we see it on the front rotor at all. So it is crazy to see that. And I know, you know, the elephant in the room is that these rotors are machined by Chips Motorsports. And if you're in the rotary game, you know that there's a whole lot of drama surrounding the Chips Motorsports and Chip and all that stuff. So this was done probably 5 or 6 years ago. We just got this rotating assembly to put in this engine, used, and everything was good, but I've never seen that before. Basically, the machine work on the side of the rotor was cut. These were lightened so much that there was not enough strength there. The side seal pushed the rotor down and collapsed the thin machining. That is gnarly. So I have no idea where this clip fits into the video, but needless to say, man, it's just wild to see. That's buckled right there too. So we have broken, buckled. Don't really see it over there. I'm half tempted, guys, to start drilling holes in this rotor. It's already pretty much torched. I don't think I would want to fix that and run it, but see how thin these machine, to see how thin the walls of this rotor are after all this lightning. But regardless, this is an insane failure. This is nothing as any engine builder or car owner that you could have expected to have happen. I sent this out to some of my engine builder friends, who I previously mentioned, and they're like, holy cow. So they've seen this before, but it's very, very uncommon to break the side of your rotor. And it's really only, you'll never find this in a stock engine. It's just these crazy, you get in here and start getting a little overzealous with your CNC machine, and you can do more harm than good in some cases. So with that, I don't know where this fits, like I said, but holy cow, that's gnarly. Gnarly to see. Everything here looks as it should. All right, so these housings, we resurfaced them, stuck them in here. They were pretty much mint. Really nothing crazy. Really nothing crazy as far as out of the ordinary wear. Obviously a little bit of carbon right here, which I haven't scraped off yet. Edges, closing edges, everything looks good on the port still. This rear housing looks perfect as well, and you can still see the difference here. Notice the oil impregnation all in this exhaust sleeve versus this one is perfectly dry. So you can literally see just how much oil consumption happening in the back versus the front. This housing, equally as perfect, basically flawless. This is just a rough clean, guys, so I haven't went over this any more than just wiping them off really, but no step wear, nothing I can feel with my fingers. You can always see the lines in them, but as long as you can't feel them, you're pretty much good. The port looks good. Haven't caught any side seals or tore up any of the edges. Same with the other side here. So this is the rear of the center iron. Front looks pretty good. Slight bit of step wear right here that I can feel. I don't know if you can hear it. Nothing too excessive though. Not really too worried about it. My port job, I'll give you up close and personal look. I don't really have any shame in my porting. I'm pretty happy with it. Baby half bridge port looks fantastic. Street port smooth also looks fantastic. Just enough to let this engine be brappy but not be undrivable. The boost makes up for the port. Just turn the boost up a little bit and you can get the horsepower you would want. And ultimately the whole point of this port was just to make it idle a little humpy. So I'm happy with it though. Judge me in the comments. Is that port acceptable? Plenty of meat there. Support that coolant seal. Plenty of weight for the bridge. Nice and smoothed in. Back in there. Overall happy with it. Porting's kind of an art form, and people judge you. So that all looks good. I've got the rear iron sitting over here. It looks perfect. The one thing I did notice, I want to show y'all this, and it's not super stoked about it, but on the rear iron, I had like an excessively large amount of sludgy oil behind the oil pressure regulator. So down in this hole, not really liking that so much. It is like an area for that sludge to settle in, but it should get cleaned out. It should get blown back out into the oil pan. We did notice that that oil was pretty thin when this thing came apart, but at the same time, this is really the only engine that I've built that has been strictly ran on E85, and this stuff's kind of new to me. We were changing the oil, I think every 1,500 miles. This was coming up on a 1,500 mile oil change at this exact spot. So we did a 500, and then we did 1,000, I think, and then this is 1,500 miles from that 1,000 or coming up on it. Always VR1 Valvoline conventional. This one does not have an oil metering pump, so we could run a synthetic oil. At the same time, don't really need it. It's fine with this. So with that is going to be the end of today's video. I really hope that you guys learned something, saw something that's important. You know, maybe you can apply to your build. In addition, I hope there's engine builders out there, guys who know more about this than me, who can comment below, maybe answer some of my questions, or like why things are wearing a certain way versus another, because I just love acquiring data. You know, I was telling Richard, the guy that owns this car, when I was talking to him on the phone, like walking him through the condition of his engine last night, and I'm like, hey, like I have every apex seal from almost every engine I've ever torn apart with the notes next to it on the miles, what I thought it looked like, you know, the whole deal. Like I have them in a filing cabinet back there, and that's one of those things I just keep track of that because I'm the data guy. I'm a numbers guy. I like to see it, have it, you know, tangibly. Now, I will say a couple of those sets of apex seals, I have taken them and filed them down and put them in other engines. So use some of that stuff too. It's, you know, a used apex seal, as long as it's tall enough, you can smooth it down, get the grooves out of it, you can reuse that, as long as you don't, you know, take the as long as you don't take the height down too fast. But that's for another video. So comment below and let me know your thoughts. You know, how would you have done this differently? What should we look out for? Is it a tuning thing? Should we pull some more fuel out of it? Should we just make sure to run more pump gas through this engine and kind of run E85 for a week or 2 tanks of fuel and then put pump gas in it, you know, for a couple tanks of fuel and just really get that cycle? I don't know. This is really my first go at it. I love being able to have the privilege of, I'm not going to say do any sort of like testing as an engine builder on somebody else's car, because what we're doing with this car should be, it's tried and proven. I mean, 450 horsepower with solid dowels on E85 and an FD RX7 on an REW that's a cakewalk for this engine. I mean, we're not stressing anything weird, but it is still rad to be able to be a part of, you know, the whole learning experience. So with that, thank you guys so much for watching. Live a life you don't need a vacation from, and I will see y'all in the next one. Keep it rad. I'm stoked though. With this thing up on the lift, I went ahead and pressure washed the bottom of the car and got this thing looking nice, because I don't like working on dirty cars. Y'all saw me yesterday, I was filthy, but I'm happy with it. Happy to learn, happy to figure it out. Easy oil control ring, soft seal, throw this thing back together, and just, we got to see how it's wearing. So we get to apply that nice data and learn, move forward. Peace, guys.